All right, guys, in this video, we're going to go over just a couple of questions, 4 questions where just kind of go over a few things in terms of what you can or cannot assume when looking at figures and diagrams. And ultimately, just be on the lookout for different symbols or notation that allows you to assume different things. Otherwise, you cannot, even if you think, oh, it must be that. You just can't assume it. Okay, so the first one. The first thing I notice are these little symbols here. These little tiny arrows, which are going to tell you that line K, this is something we can't assume, that line K and line J are parallel. So that one I can assume because of that notation. I also can look at some of these angle numbers, and I can see that 8 and 4 are vertical angles. So angle 4 is congruent with angle 8. I can do the same thing with 7 and 1. So those are congruent. And the same thing down there with angles 2, 3, 5, and 6. You can also say those vertical angles are congruent. Another thing I wanted to point out that you got to be careful about is you see this point D. Some students will say that it is collinear with points C and E, but you can't assume that, right? There's no line that connects all three of those. So we're not going to assume that as well. That's kind of everything I wanted to talk about with the figure for number 1. So just again, a reminder, only look at the symbols that are given. Okay, in figure number 2, all right, you'll notice that lines K and line J do not have those symbols that say they're parallel. So we cannot assume that line K and line J are parallel. So I cannot assume lines K, I'll say this, I cannot assume, oh, that's the wrong thing, my bad. I cannot assume line K and line J are parallel. Even though you might say, oh, but they look parallel, you just can't assume it, okay? Another thing that might happen is if you look at these other two lines, line FG and line EC, you might think, oh, they're going to intersect at some point. Again, only go with what the diagram is showing you. So I cannot assume that lines FG and CE are going to actually intersect. I can still assume my same thing with my vertical angles, right? That's still going to be true, just like it was with the previous diagram, because those are intersecting. So we can still assume that. And this time you'll notice I actually do have a line that is going through all those points, C, D, and E. So I can actually say, that C, D, and E are collinear. So that one I can say, all right, different from that figure before. All right, so that's, I think, all I wanted to say about this one. Let's go to number 3. Okay, so number 3, kind of very similar to number 2 in the sense of it looks like you might have parallel lines with lines C, D, and BF, but again, there's no notation that says that, so cannot assume, I'll just do this, I cannot assume that CD, that line, is parallel to BF. Okay, so not assuming that. In terms of things that I can say, right, I do see 3 different angles, and I'll label them as like angle 1, angle 2, and angle 3. Those all will add up to 180 degrees, all right, because we do have that line AB there, so I can assume that. Another thing that students will assume is they'll assume that there's a right angle at this angle DBE, but I cannot assume that, so cannot assume a right angle at angle DBE. Okay, you'll know if it's a right angle because they will put a symbol that will show you that. Okay, now number 4, you can kind of see where we're going here. There's that symbol, so that angle right there, we can assume that that's a right angle there. And you'll notice I have some green arrows to say that EF and DB are parallel to each other. And then also those 2 purple lines will say that those lines are also parallel as well. But I guess that one actually is a ray down there. All right. Now, again, because I have a symbol that says it's a right angle, this angle down here is also going to be a right angle. All right, and then when we look at, looks like we have some vertical angles again, right? We've got vertical angles here and here, as well as, here and here, a lot of places for vertical angles. So again, a lot of different things we can say with number 4, but just want to make sure and point out the notation that's on there. If you don't see the notation, you just cannot assume, even if it looks like it. All right, so I know this wasn't a super long video, but I wanted just a reminder of things that you can and can't assume based on notation.